Today I'm having a conversation with John Olinto, the co-founder and CEO of One Mighty Mill. I came across the company about 3 years ago and I was instantly hooked. And the main reason why is I believe they are working on one of the most important foundational problems of our US food system. They are on a mission to fix flour. The company is building decentralized stone mills across the US where they mill down organic wheat and then they produce bread and other flour-based products like tortillas and bagels, and then they sell them to retailers, and they're now available nationwide at places like Whole Foods and Costco. Now, this is what was fascinating to learn about kind of the evolution of the wheat and flour industry in the US. Back in 1900, there were more than 25,000 stone mills in the US. They really served as like the anchor to local food systems and were the bedrock of local communities. Fast forward to today, and John estimates that we have about 300 of them left. And they've been replaced by a handful of very large companies making industrial flour that holds literally no nutritional value for us. It actually works against our bodies, not for them. This is why you might hear people say, hey, when I go to Europe, I can eat pasta every day or eat a full baguette, and I feel fine. I don't gain any weight. I don't feel bloated. If I did that in the US, good luck after one day doing that. Well, this is the reason why. Flour is the root cause of this problem. And One Mighty Mill is looking to kind of address this. And what I find fascinating is they're looking to create a model around decentralized production and to be able to produce this more nutritious food at scale. I think you will find this conversation fascinating to learn about John's story building the fast casual chain Be Good and how he discovered the problems with our wheat supply chain and why it got him motivated to go solve that problem. And I hope you enjoy it. There's some statistics that'll blow you away. And really, for me, this is such an important point if we want to work on fixing our food system. So please share this episode with everyone that you know. And more importantly, if you're in a Whole Foods or Costco, or even go online and go try One Mighty Mill's products. And if you like them, go support what they're doing. It's really, really important because that's how we're going to make a change in the food system. Enjoy, and remember to go direct. Okay, so when I step back and think about the reason why I'm starting going direct, what you're working on, John, and your team is literally at the intersection of like the two most important things for me, which is fixing our food system and decentralized production for many different reasons. And so I believe that you're working on one of the most foundational important pieces to this, and we'll get into there. So I first, kind of to kick this off, it sounds kind of a trite question maybe, but for the audience, can you explain to them what wheat is and why it's so foundational to the food system?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to start things off. I would say that I wish that what you just opened with, we could tell the buyers at all these grocery stores, because when we think about fixing a foundational problem, that is kind of what our value proposition is. It's what we're doing. So there is this whole level of education. So stuff like this and being able to actually have a point of view and have the time to explain what the problem is rather than have to talk in sound bites and claims unpacked is where the conversation has to lead. So I'm psyched to be here. What wheat is I will use one of those claims or one of those buzzwords, but wheat is the original superfood. Wheat is a seed. It has nourished humanity since the beginning of time. And when you step back and look at it and think about it as a seed, it's completely nutrient dense. There's 3 elements of that seed, just like basically all seeds. There's an outer layer, which is called the bran. It's all fiber. And actually, before we actually talk about wheat specifically, I think the best analogy and what we use when we're trying to educate people about what wheat is, we always talk about it in comparison to an egg. So if you think about an egg, there's 3 parts. There's a shell, which is fiber. There's the interior white, which is really, there's a lot of protein in that, obviously. But then the yolk has all the nutrient density. When you think about the wheat, it's a wheat kernel or a wheat seed. The bran is the shell. There's something called the endosperm, which is actually white. It's starch. And so that's when you make white flour, you're just consuming that starch. that starch is in there, protects the germ. And the germ is the yolk. And so the germ is that kind of nutrient dense embryo of the wheat. So if you plant a wheat seed, it grows again. So that germ is the embryo. That embryo has living fats, oils, all kinds of nutrient density. And really the other thing about wheat is that what we don't think about as Americans, or I guess maybe it's more than Americans, but in America specifically, we consume more wheat, which in turn is flour, than anything else in our entire food system. It's not even close. I've looked at the per capita consumption of wheat and flour versus the next biggest food product, and wheat is X, chicken. So chicken is second, but we eat twice as much wheat and flour as we do. If you look at things down like Brussels sprouts, it's like 0.00. It's like totally meaningless. But when you think about it in that context, and then you think about the American diet and the things that are so core to like what our identity is, hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza, donuts, sometimes they don't stop and think about the fact that all of those things, the platform for all of that is wheat and flour. And it's really, at the most basic level, it's pretty disturbing to think that the thing we eat the most of by far is the thing that we have the most detached relationship in everything in our food system. So there is no connection back. There's no curiosity. There's no questions asked. It's invisible. And I believe that it's intended to be invisible because big food does not want us to start asking questions about ultra processed flour, because there's one huge system that feeds our country, and there is no alternative to that system. And that system really takes that wheat, how we began this question, takes that seed, which is a complete, really great, nutritious food that we've eaten since the beginning of time, and turns it into something that is not, into flour that is completely different than that original seed.
Okay, so we got the wheat, which is then flour is made from the wheat, and then all types of breads and pizzas and tortillas.
Yes.
Tortillas and everything.
Everything.
What's wrong with our bread in the United States?
So, well, there's a few things, but it really starts with flour. So if you think about four ingredients of bread, it's, flour, salt, yeast, water, four ingredients. And so 90%, I mean, if you do it without the water, if you just think about raw ingredients, you're talking about basically your entire loaf is made out of one ingredient, which is flour. In that flour, about 150 years ago, America moved from regional food systems and stone mills that were a part of all communities, which made consumers and people have an understanding of wheat and flour because it was very much a part of the way they thought about how they used it. Flour on a stone mill is fresh, and so it's perishable. It has a shelf life, so you have to use it. You have to treat it more like produce than you do, like we do now, which is like we treat flour like a bag of chips. And that all those regional food systems that were being produced through stone mills moved to a very much industrial system that was designed to produce white flour, to feed our country white flour. And that system, to produce white flour in the fastest way possible, in the most efficient way, created this thing called a roller mill, which was able to strip the germ out of that endosperm, remove it, and make white flour, and strip away both the bran and endosperm, and make white flour, which doesn't have really any of the original nutrients, and it's not the complete food that Mother Nature kind of makes for us. And that system took hold, and nobody's ever looked back ever since. So for 150 years, that is the system. So if you want to make your own bread, and you're looking at, you're in a Whole Foods or one of these natural organic grocers, all of that flour on the shelf, while it's going to be in different bags and with different brands, and sometimes it's going to have different value propositions, whether it's organic or B Corp or any of these other kind of these positive attributes. The thing that is undeniable is it's been pushed through a system that changed it from its original state in a way that's not good enough for the consumer.
So is it just flattening? Is it flattening the wheat? Is that what it is when you use the term roller mill?
So, well, a roller mill cracks the seed,
okay,
and then is able to remove the bran. So that's the fiber that's gone. And then it's able to strip out that germ, which is pretty incredible. But the germ makes flour perishable. So when the germ on a stone mill is crushed whole, that germ, so the healthy fats, oils, all that, like the yolk is pushed into the starch, into the endosperm. And so flour in a stone mill is perishable. So it will go bad, and it will degrade both nutritionally and taste until it ultimately goes rancid. The flour produced on a roller mill lives forever. And so when you think about the way people use flour in America, you put it in maybe you put it in a jar, but you probably keep it in a bag and you leave it in your cupboard and never think about it. You could use it 10 years from now, or you could use it whenever. And it's going to be stable. It's going to perform probably the exact same way. And it's really because it's dead and it's just empty starch.
And so is this the core reason why, people ought to say, and I spend a fair amount of time over in Europe, but people always say, like, when I eat bread over in France, let's say, and like, I don't feel like bloated and I feel fine. I'm almost eating like a whole baguette and I feel fine. But when I'm eating bread in the US, I just feel kind of bloated and don't feel very good. Is that,
Yeah.
what's causing that, generally speaking?
I think there's different layers to it, but I would always argue that, so wheat has also been changed. So it's been hybridized in America. It's typically not grown organic. So there's things like glyphosate that are sprayed. So there's definitely other things that undoubtedly the human body will respond to negatively. But I think the core is that we took a complete food and we pushed it through a system that changed it into something that Mother Nature didn't intend for us to eat at the quantity that we do in a modified form. And ultimately, someday we're going to respond to that. And whether it's gluten sensitivity or if it's bloating, like you said, or if it's diabetes, I think there's all kinds of long-term effects to eating processed food.
Sure. Okay, let's take a step back. So what got you on this journey and what took you on this journey of trying to fix flour and founding?
Yeah, so sometimes I think it's the best thing that we could have, as a team, we could have taken on, just because it's so important. It is inspiring, but other times I just feel like we are pushing that boulder up a hill because there's so little education and awareness on this problem we're trying to solve. But I will say that the way that we discovered it is, my best friend and I, we started a restaurant business in Boston almost 25 years ago. And the idea of it was to make what we said real food fast. So we took a traditional fast food menu and we tried to make everything from scratch, homemade. And over time, the concept evolved into making it from scratch in our restaurants every day wasn't enough. We needed to actually understand what was happening at the source. And so we created these very transparent supply chains. We made it very transparent to our consumer and our teams. If you had walked into one of our restaurants, you'd see a map. And we ended up building and running over 70 of them. And they were very much like a Sweet Green almost, in terms of fast casual. So you order at the counter, it takes 5 minutes to get your food. Our menu was really focused a lot around actually like burgers, salads, fries. But the core concept was that real food meant we knew everything that happened to what we put on your plate. And as we built the company, we were able to go out regionally and create direct relationships with the guy, literally the farmer that grew our potatoes for our fries that we hand cut. We established a relationship with a co-op that we sourced 100% of our beef from sustainable local farmers in New England. And then it went line by line as we kind of got bigger and better and we became more committed. And then inevitably we sold a ton of turkey burgers and veggie burgers and we put them on the proprietary whole wheat bun. And we always, on that map, we would always say the local bakery that baked our buns for us. Mm-hmm. But then, as we really went deep, it became clear that we could find a farm every part of our menu. But then with the bakery, it always ended the story always started and ended at the baker in the bakery. And so we saw that was we were like, that doesn't make sense. And then we traveled to farms. We never saw wheat. We never even considered it. And then at the same time, over the last 20 years running a restaurant, it's very hands-on, obviously, if you want to be successful. And so we watched in real time as this gluten intolerance and gluten-free,
movement.
Thing. Yeah, movement. I guess I'd call it. I don't know. I don't want to call it a fad because it's not a fad.
No, it's a thing, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a thing. Lifestyle, whatever. we saw it, and we saw it from the beginning, and then we saw our menu mix shift, which is like people were definitely coming to our restaurant looking for a healthy alternative. And they were, our mix would, in the early days was definitely very sandwich driven. And then it became very much focused on salads and then these bowls. So like quinoa and kale bowls. And so it was clear that like the consumer had some kind of like, I don't want to say fear, but a truly healthy consumer was not going to choose eating a bun every day. And so when we were at one point, we had, a large institutional investor come into our company. And when I had to start thinking about what we were going to do next, I kept going back to this thing, which is there's this problem and nobody knows anything, including me. And after 20 years of trying to really connect the consumer to a source, how come I didn't know anything? And that's kind of how the whole thing started. It was pretty lucky. I got some time because I got to leave the first company or the restaurant and got a little bit of money, but mostly got a year where I was able to work and get paid because I had some forced time off. And first thing really that I did was I found a person or a family up in northern Maine growing organic wheat. And that's kind of how the whole thing started, which was there was this identification that there was a problem. And then just my understanding was that the growers themselves, they always feels like they're trying to solve a problem too, and so I felt like we could really be educated if we could spend some time with the people right at the source, and I learned a lot.
You took the journey.
Yeah, 100%.
So when was this approximately?
This was 2017, so 7 years ago.
And so when you step back, I read when I've done a fair amount of research on your work at One Mighty Bill, but one of the stats that I found fascinating, and you mentioned it earlier, was, I'm always a fan of learning from history. Like I have this whole thing of like everything we're talking around production, if we're talking about more decentralized, just how everything was before the first industrial revolution.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can learn a lot from history. And you had this really interesting stat on the website I saw that said in like 1800-ish, there's about 25,000 stone mills in the US. Is that about right? And then today, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, the stat is, and I used to use it in every meeting, every investor, everything. It was like, that was how I would really try to bring some data to the problem in a way that is hard. Like it's hard for people to understand the problem through flour itself. But if you can talk about a broken system, then clearly the end product is not going to be good enough. And so, yeah, it was 25,000 stone mills across America in the year 1900. And then by the year 2000, there was 201 is the stat. And so to think about that collapsing that quickly shows how kind of the food that nourished us could become so invisible. Because it was just taken from, being a part of our everyday life and the way that we as consumers would use and purchase and think about an ingredient that kind of was so core to our diet. The other crazy stat that I learned that goes right hand in hand with that is in that same 100-year period, the state of Maine itself went from 30,000 acres of wheat being grown to zero. Yes, it's very hard to believe. And so the person or the family that was growing wheat up in northern Maine, this farmer and his daughter were the first farmers to bring organic wheat back to the state of Maine. So they absolutely were the OG and really the source of all the knowledge.
Interesting. And so when you thought about this problem, you're like, hey, which is my always favorite when you're like, no one's attacking this and it's so fundamental, I have to do something about it. So the idea to say, hey, how do we recreate how it was? Obviously modernize a little bit, but is that kind of the vision here of having stone mills, more decentralized stone mills throughout the US?
Yeah. I mean, I think the goal is to make food that is as close to a natural process as possible and to do it in the most important foods in our diet. And so, at the beginning, the mission was very much about rebuilding local food systems. And we did 100%. Like we sourced 100% of the wheat from that farm in Maine for 2 years, milled it all in Boston, and then serve markets in our New England area. And then you realize like the cards are stacked against companies like us. And so if we want to exist, then we have to obviously stay true to our mission, but we have to figure out ways that we can scale and support growth without building mills like in every state. And so we have been able to build mills on both coasts. And, in the core of our business is just the coast. So each coast supports from that region. But I think as we've grown and evolved over 6 years of our existence, the mission, like if we had done this call on day one, I would have told you, man, we're going to build mills everywhere. We're going to rebuild this. But in reality, it has to be more about building mills, but really the overall goal is to create product that is closer to the way that our ancestors ate.
So kind of you would say if you were to switch it up, speaking today, it's like it's much more of like a regional approach versus like a highly, highly localized approach from a production standpoint.
Yeah.
Talk to me about supply chain. I know we talked a while ago about that, but I know it's been a big, I think 95% or something like that of all wheat in the U.S. is non-organic, or what's the state of the market?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the best data I've seen is, and maybe this is dated by a year or two, was 98%, which is so crazy to think about, because you think about the only brand that's growing in bread, sliced bread, is Dave's Killer Bread, which is organic. Okay, so just that as as somebody that knows nothing, that's probably a consumer, you would just imagine that organic wheat and bread represents a much larger piece of kind of our overall national consumption. But you're not thinking about anything, food service, restaurant, every other product in kind of in the grocery store. And so I think sometimes that number, it seems like hard to believe, but I think what's even harder to believe is how much of this ingredient our country consumes. That even if like there's a high flying, powerful brand, it's still just a blip of what we consume overall.
In your mind, how do you start tipping? So how do you start tipping the scale the other way then, in your mind?
You tip the scale you do it by creating a powerful message to the consumer that is so simple for them to understand. And this has taken me a long time to come to terms with, because, when you start something like this, it's so, it's such a big undertaking, and you want the consumer to give you credit for everything, right? Like, geez, like we're sourcing direct from the organic grower. We're stone milling. We are, we're using all these great ingredients. And then there's all this other stuff around what we do for community and mission. And so you spend, or at least I do, you spend the beginning of your years, like trying to tell a huge story, because it's so good. And it's like, it is so good. Like it comes from such a good place. Like anybody that would start anything like around making better food there is goodness in that. And I think the people that do that want everybody to know, but in reality, nobody has time, and it doesn't work. And so it's taken a while, but we are constantly trying to refine is what is our conceptual benefit statement. And so what is the breakthrough that makes stone milled have meaning? Because right now it doesn't. For 6 years, we've led this thing about education around stone milled, and it costs us a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time. And a lot of the education has to happen through so people can try the product and you can tell them. And that's just a really, really long, hard road. And so to make real change, you need to really create a consumer demand. And that consumer demand can only be, I think, created, and that groundswell can only be created if the benefit to the consumer is super simple and clean and easy. And for us, it's a challenge, because a lot of times you think about consumer benefit and it's distilled down to grams of protein, carbs, and this is not what we're about. We are about natural systems. We are about whole, complete food. We are about minimally processed ingredients. And so that message on a pack can't be X grams of protein, because I'll tell you what, like the next wave of breads is probably going to put whey protein in their thing. And then you're going to have 20 grams, and it'll be like, well, what the hell are we doing? Like we would never do that. Like what we try to do is, instead of adding things, we try always to take things out. Like there's still things in our formulas that we're like, we can take it out. And so like this year alone, like we already, even though it's only January, like we're doing a next run of packaging, and our ingredient depth will be even smaller on the next time we run our packaging. So that was a very long answer, but that's where I see the shift has to be. It's not on like, I don't like what people say, like, oh, the consumer has to wake up and all this stuff. It's like, that's not how it's going to work. It's going to be, are you smart enough to actually talk to your consumer and figure it out? Like, figure out what moves the needle. What do they respond to? What is like that magic claim or whatever it is that you can have on pack? And then how can you put that and broadcast it through all kinds of channels? You know what I mean?
Totally. They just want their crumble cookies, man. I guess.
Seriously, how does that work? There's so many things that like always, and especially at this moment, like there's so much talk now about ultra processed and ingredients and like this. I convinced myself, like, if there's going to be a moment, it's going to be now. Like, it's going to be now. Like the way that ultra processed works is like, it brings the consumer, hopefully it's creating a conversation where the consumer wants to know how things are made. And when people ask that question, then man, we win.
Yeah, for sure.
But that has never been a part of the equation for 6 years, ever. People, since we started, it's been about keto, low carb.
Yeah, for sure.
Paleo. Every year there's like a new thing, and it's crazy because it's new things that we can never put on our package.
Yeah, for sure. But listen, at the end of the day, I'm always, I think fads are fads, trends are trends. But at the end of the day, if you stay true to kind of what you're saying, which is, I actually believe, I'm with you. I think we're at a turning point culturally in the U.S. Obviously with the recent election and the new administration. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, have you felt, because of RFK, the whole Maha movement, have you kind of felt an energy coming towards you a little bit, or people reaching out that you hadn't before, because it is such a big part of RFK's agenda around fixing big food? And
I'm waiting for that phone to ring. I'm waiting.
Really?
Well, I feel like, yeah, well, I haven't
Okay.
seen it. I think that I see it on a very personal level. So when we just did a Costco road show in Colorado, which means we basically stand in an end cap for 3 days for over 4 weekends. And this is like Costco's testing ground. Like they want to see if the Costco member wants your product. So it's great, but it's also a great learning opportunity. And I will say, standing in Colorado for a full 3 days or 4 days straight, talking to 1,000 people, I mean, that community is, locked in.
They're dialed.
Locked in.
They're
They
dialed
are
for sure.
dialed. Like, the idea of no seed oil is like, that was just in a time. And we sell, our biggest market is LA. So we understand the LA consumer.
Okay.
But the Colorado consumer, and so I would say that's where you can feel the momentum. You can feel the momentum if you're in these communities with a certain customer demographic. But in terms of like media, and retail, especially retail moves very, very, very differently in terms of how they respond to not necessarily trends, but just consumer conversations.
We're going to get to that. Don't worry. So how many mills do you have operating today?
We have 10.
Okay. And are you're sourcing all of your wheat, U.S. grown organic wheat?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. All U.S. grown, direct to grower. We have about 8 growers. In the East Coast, we source it. So we're still true to our mission of sourcing, obviously as much as we can locally every year. And we've set certain targets. We define local based on the mileage from our first mill and bakery to our first farm in Maine. Okay. And so that distance was like 250 miles. So that's how we quantify that. Last year, we put 4 million pounds of organic wheat under contract with our growers. 1 million of that we actually milled last year was what we call local. It'll be even more this year because 100% of the wheat that we mill on the West Coast, which is our fastest growing market, is 100% from Sacramento Valley. And that's That's less than 150 miles from our mills in California. We do source for the East Coast production. We do
Hmm.
source a large amount from Montana. So it's a co-op of 3 growers in Montana.
Okay, got it. Are you so are you the majority of your sales are your own finished products, right? Is that correct? Or are you actually selling
Yes.
your flour as well?
No. Yeah, we don't sell our flour. We do have a couple of relationships with some kind of, higher profile chefs in kind of the Boston area where we started that use our flour and showcase it on the menu. But our focus is to use our flour in our products, and create this brand that connects with the consumer.
This is one of the big themes that I'm going to be really diving into, and I'm actually really excited about, but how does kind of advanced technologies play a role, if any, right now in your stone mills, whether that's robotics or automation or even the beginnings of applying AI to streamline production or make it more efficient?
Yeah, I think so. We've evolved significantly, which is great. I think if you think about our first stone mill, so I think the cool thing about, but not the cool thing, but what keeps this very real is that there's one mill builder in the United States who builds horizontal stone mills. So horizontal stone mills are the traditional way of crushing. They're 1,200-pound stones, all granite, and they stack on top of each other. The top one spins, the bottom stone stays fixed, and it's fed from a hopper on top. So that same stone mill builder who built our first mill for our first bakery has built every single one of them. The really interesting thing about that mill builder is that he is a baker by trade, an amazing baker, he and his wife.
Interesting. Okay.
And he built his own stone mill probably, I want to say at least 15 years ago, because he saw the exact same problem, but his ambition was really to produce bread for his community with regional grains grown, or I guess local grains grown in Vermont. He's up in Vermont, and then support his own home bakery. And then there was a demand, and so he built a few, and then we found him, and so our original mill, while it's the same stones, 4 feet, 1,200 pounds in all 10 of our locations, or all 10 of our mills, kind of the systems that support those mills are way more efficient than how we did at the beginning. So our first mill, we literally had to climb up a ladder with 50-pound bags of wheat. Sure. And put them into the hopper.
Yeah.
And then run the system. The second stage was so we moved from that single stone mill in our bakery in Massachusetts to a warehouse in Boston, where we then worked with our stone mill builder to come up with a system where we could link 3 stone mills together. So 3 of the same exact systems
Adjacent
with one air handling system that would pull the flour from all 3 mills into one central kind of repository where you could sift. We do have to sift for some of our products. We have to sift a little bit of the bran off of the stones. But that system was still very manual. So we still were feeding it on a ladder. We were still using shop vac in some cases so there was a little bit of like basically homemade pneumatic to get the grain up. But then inevitably that flour that would come off those stones through the air handling system would go into a 50-pound bag that you'd have to manually load, weigh, close, and then palletize. We then built another facility in New York, and this is after 2 more years, and Andrew is the name of our mill builder. We challenged him with a system that would be a gravity fed and way less labor. And so now it's 2,000 pounds super sacks, which means the wheat from the farm is not coming in 50-pound bags. It's coming in palletized totes that is going forklift, sitting on top of the mill, and then gravity is pulling. Obviously, it's gravity fed system to pull the wheat into the stones. And then we invested in a much better pneumatic system. So throughput increased dramatically. The downside of this facility is that we still weren't able to automate the packing. So the bakery, when we take flour to the bakery on the East Coast, it's still going in 50-pound bags. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're producing 1 million pounds of flour a year, that's a significant cost in a lot of waste.
Time. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so the cool thing is when we built our mills on the West Coast, and this is 2 years ago, we replicated the system. And the big difference is now we're able to produce into those sacks and then bake from that super sack. So removing kind of those 50-pound bags on pallets. None of this sounds all that like, I mean, this isn't AI. This is like
Step
trial
one.
and error, like
Yeah, totally.
stupid guys like trying to figure this out. And so none of it's breakthrough. None of it's breakthrough, but as you build a system from scratch, after about a few months, you're like, oh shoot, why didn't we do that? And then you go back to the drawing board and you make it better. And so the system we have in California is very efficient. We have overinvested in infrastructure. So we've raised capital. Like I had mentioned, every couple of years, we've needed it to build our brand. There's so much that goes into marketing and education and awareness to try to create this change at the consumer level. And so we positioned ourselves to really grow. And so we have like 3x. We can do like triple. We can produce triple the flour what we're producing currently.
That was my next question. What's the production capacity per stone mill location approximately?
So we do like 20,000 pounds a week per facility. But that's like it's a 40-hour work week, and it is 5 days a week. And typically we're running just two of the stones or two of the mill systems, and you can run 3 simultaneously. It's always good to run 2 and have one not in use, because inevitably there is downtime over time. There's also a need to every 90 days or so, we have to kind of sharpen the stones. So that causes, you have to stop production. You have to get the stones up on a forklift and then sharpen them to make sure that you can basically produce the flour up to spec. The other piece of technology that has really impacted our business is being scientific in our approach to our specs around flour. So back in the early days, the harvest would, in Maine, the harvest would come up and we'd just say, send it down. And then we'd try to figure out how to adjust formulas on the fly. And that is on a very small scale, and at a small bakery, you can kind of do it because you're not doing large runs. But as you scale, we're running thousands of loaves of bread on a production run. And so if your flour isn't to spec, you will lose all of that. You will lose all of it. And when you're dealing with a live product, and you're especially dealing with a product that changes based on harvest, you need, like, our co-founder and the guy that does all of the baking and oversees all the food, he calls it like GPS. So like GPS when you're driving, like, in advance what's going to happen. And so every lot that comes from the farm, the farmers know what our spec is, but when we receive the lot, we run it through a testing system that will have transparency to those key metrics that drive performance that we need based on the formulas we set. When we measure that, and then what we do is we mill the flour, and then we have another tool where you take the flour and you simulate the dough. So you hydrate the flour just like you would at the bakery, and then you're able to kind of replicate what would happen at the mixing, because that's what drives everything truly, is once the flour is mixed, that'll indicate true performance through the bake. And so we're able to simulate all of that before any flour hits the bakery. And that's really kind of like, that is kind of going to be our asset besides the brand, which is everything, and the message and the connection. It's like the value of what we're doing is like, we created this new system, and this system has to be supported by tools that can deliver consistency, because nobody else, like nobody else is doing this at scale in the country.
Right. So it's kind of a formula. It's kind of, I would say it's a formulation at some point, knowing how to formulate based upon your spec.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the challenge is that, we have these relationships with growers, and the harvest is in September, and they may not hit our spec.
I was just going to ask you what happens into that, especially if you contract with them.
Yeah. So that requires us to reset a lot of things. One is we've invested in this mixer. So you can blend, like, a very large mixer. So you can blend out, thousands of pounds of wheat. If you're at one of the key metrics for performance is protein. And so if we need 12% protein to bake a perfect loaf of bread, our farm in New York just harvested and they're at 10, then that's where we'd have to then mix or blend some of the higher protein wheat from another farm to execute on that. So, and then there's things that, like, the reality is that you may not hit your spec. And so then it's a formulation adjustment, which is typically more hydration in the dough. So that's where, but hopefully, like, the dream would be there's only one harvest.
Sure.
And so you do it once, but in reality, there's different lots. And so the same farm has there's different nuances and different inconsistencies across the board. And so you really have to you have to pay attention to that front end to make sure you're getting a great product.
Well, it's kind of what you're saying, like that know-how is just critical and essential if you're looking at any type of scale. I mean, it's just the reality.
Yeah, and it's really like the value of our business.
Interesting. So a couple other questions here. So do you own your own bakeries as well? So or do you actually contract out the making of your product?
That's a great question. So we own one bakery in where we started. And so the reality, and if this goes back to mission, the country doesn't need more bakeries. There's tons of commercial bakeries. What our country needs is better ingredient. And so we knew from the beginning that there was no way we could find a bakery to use our flour when we didn't know we didn't even know what direction we could give them. And so we knew that to get this thing started and to prove as a proof of concept that we could do this, we needed our own facility. And so we operated for 2 years. 100% of all of our manufacturing was happening in our own bakery.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately we hit capacity and we built those additional mills. And then we found a bakery partner close by in Massachusetts, like literally five miles from that new milling facility. And then in New York, when it was time we needed additional capacity, we found a bakery partner, and then we found a warehouse as close as we could to their facility. And then we applied that same strategy in California. So the first thing we did was we find the right bakery partner, and then we find space so that we're reducing logistics and freight so that our meals are as close as we can be to the source. There's still a lot of hands-on work that our team does because our flour is so different for the bakeries to handle. And so over time they do get a handle on it. But as a part of the startup, there's definitely a learning curve. The flour just obviously performs way differently. So they have to kind of like just trust our formulas. And the co-founder of our company he's on site, almost in most runs, that's unique in terms of a co-manufacturing relationship.
Sure. How would you compare so I'm just going to riff another, if you hear like Bob's Red Mill or some of these other premium flour brands that you see on the shelves in retail, like how do you compare? Is it a very similar product, the flour that you're creating and the products out of it, or is there any fundamental difference?
Yeah, everything comes off a roller mill in America. It just does.
Interesting.
So I hate to talk bad about anybody because some of the best flour companies are amazing. Like they're ESOPs, they're B Corps like us.
Sure.
They have they're amazing companies. But the reality is that to do anything at the scale they do, they have to comply with the system that feeds America. So it's all the same.
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
So is there like some not shadiness, but mislabeling or representation where things are said they're stone mill, but they're really not? Like, how does that work in this space?
I don't like to talk bad about anybody.
Of course. You don't have to name any names, but.
Well, I think the best way, and I talked to kind of somebody that I've made friends with at a giant milling company.
Okay.
And they've told me what the reality is. And the reality is that everybody has to use the same system. But what he did say, without saying hey, you don't want to trash anybody. But what he did say is, think of it this way. Wouldn't there be a significant, huge difference for a home baker that wanted to use real living flour
Yeah.
wouldn't the consumer be pissed? So like, cause it doesn't perform. And so if you think about it that way, it's like, if it is different, then why are home bakers able to use it without a giant learning curve? And I think that's the best way I think you can say with some conviction yet that this is not whatever the system is they say produces it, the end product is still it's still going to perform the same as everything else on the shelf. And so I think that's where I think you find the truth. I will say that you could also just look at the shelf life.
That was my next question, was shelf life. Yeah.
Yeah. So Stone, and we've learned this from our our mill builder, who's like if you talk about somebody that's doing things based on like personal mission to create better food, it's this guy. And so, we follow him, and he always has told us like he thinks about it as a 90-day shelf life, but he truly does try to bake it as soon as he can from milling. But over 90 days is where he thinks that you've kind of reached the point of no return.
Of the flour.
Yeah, of the flour.
Okay.
And so it's interesting. So when we did sell flour. You asked that question at the beginning, do we sell our flour? We did. When we first started, we sold our flour to Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
And it was difficult because the way that they've set up their system is that it's not intended to have a shelf life. And so the way it's warehoused, the way the distributor handles it, the way it gets tagged on the store shelf, like nobody's tagging. When you buy bread, you see a Best By date. That doesn't exist with flour. And so we were tagging it ourselves at the mill, and we were ahead. The consumer wasn't ready for that.
Mm-hmm.
So we do sell our flour online direct, and we have our first mill and bakery still, we serve the public. And so we sell a lot of flour through there. But yeah, back to the original question, the claims that are made around flour, I think if there's no stone mills, so how would it be produced?
For sure. All right. Now we're going to get into some the juicy stuff around distribution. Okay. So then my next question is shelf life for your finished product, your tortillas, your bagels that you're selling at Costco and Whole Foods. So what type of shelf life do those have if you're trying to get the cleanest label possible?
So we've made huge strides in this. So when we started, we had 7-day shelf life, and that is hard, really hard, especially when nobody knows your brand, because like you're just sweating it every day. You're like, oh my God, those shelves are big, and we put 20 loaves on there, and nobody even knows our brand. We have optimized shelf life for sure through things like super high grade vinegar. So we added vinegar to our formula. It's interesting. Like you would think that would create a sensory issue where the last thing you want to taste is vinegar in your bread.
Sure.
But it does dissipate. It's funny. Like if you ate our bread right off the line, you would say like, oh my God, like my tongue is stinging
from the vinegar.
But over like 24-hour period, and then even longer, as it kind of moves through the system, it dissipates, and so it's not noticeable. We've optimized around that. Organic honey is also helps a lot with shelf life. Any kind of natural sugar extends it. So we are, I guess there's two things. So at Costco, we distribute fresh. So meaning we have a company that walks into Costco and puts our bread on the shelf, and we have a 12-day shelf life there. For Whole Foods, it's different. Whole Foods runs their bread program through a lot of the breads as frozen, and then it thaws at the store level, and then they put it on the shelves themselves. And so that one is completely different, but also eliminates a lot of the shrink or the losses, because at the store level, they are kind of day by day managing it. So they're able to kind of control inventory, and it's on them. In that instance, they take the loss. If you're doing a fresh program,
Mm-hmm.
the supplier,
Mm-hmm.
if it goes out of code and we take it off the shelf,
it's on you.
Yeah. So two very, very different models for distribution.
So do you work, this is like the gatekeeper. So you have to work through the distributors of the world, like KeHE's of the world or UNFI, or right? Because if you're working with Whole Foods, and does Costco has their own, or do they also have a similar setup with a broadline distributor?
Well, what's crazy about bread is, like we say about flour, there's just one system.
Mm-hmm.
There's really, bread in America is really owned by two companies, very large companies. One's called Grupo Bimbo, and one is called Flowers Foods. And if you were to go walk into a conventional grocery store in Detroit, I would say, truly, I would say like 95% of that entire bread aisle is owned by those two companies. So just different bags, different logos, obviously, but all pushed through their bakeries, their drivers, like their distribution system, but their drivers. So if you're at a grocery store, you might see people working the bread aisle. Those are not employees of the grocery store. Those are employees of the bread company that are doing merchandising, putting stuff on shelf, putting merchandising. And so to disrupt that is really, really hard. And so there are grocery stores, like we got into Target. We couldn't find a distributor because everybody that's going to Target are a part of those two companies. Even like Dave's Killer Bread, which is like, you feel like, oh, it's some independent, like natural thing. It's a part of this. It's a part of that same system. It's owned by one of those companies. And so we couldn't find we couldn't find a distributor that was going to the store and dropping bread off, or even dropping a fresh product that we could jump on the truck with. Costco is different because there's so much volume. It does create almost like a cottage industry of smaller distributors who maybe aren't necessarily just doing bread. Maybe they're doing tortillas. Maybe they're taking like some of the bakery items at a Costco, like banana bread or muffins. And so there's ways in, but it makes it really, really hard because you're fighting against an established system that's really good at execution. They may not be making the most nutritious products, but man, they are good about getting that product on shelf and making it, merchandising it, putting it at eye level, making sure it's rotated, and making sure they protect their space, because the space on that aisle is where all the value is, because you have to be seen by the consumer.
Yeah. So basically in this world, I mean, you have no other choice than to work through the kind of the traditional distribution model and retail. I mean, I assume that's where 95% of all consumer bread buying happens. Supermarkets.
Yeah, that's the place to be. And it's interesting, like you think about places where you could be as an emerging brand to be disruptive. And so like, oh, can we be in the deli, or can we be in the produce section? But we've tried everything, and you want to be where the consumer is, like, you want to be relevant. So like, the consumer is looking for a product, you better be where they're going to be looking for it. Like, it's fine to have secondary placement and be in one of those kind of like other areas.
Sure.
But you're going to live and die in that bread aisle. And for us, we want to, there's one brand right now that owns the better for you consumer. And so for us, we think we have to be next to that brand, because that consumer is already trained to purchase that. And so we need to be seen during that time of trial. Clearly, the story about One Mighty Meal can't be that we just steal share from the market leader.
Of course.
Everybody wants us to, grow the category, is like the magic words.
Sure.
And that happens over time, because as this conversation around ultra processed keeps emerging, we will bring people who have abandoned bread or don't eat bread every day. We'll bring them to try us, and that would be new to category. But in the short term, it's like, you want to be where that better for you consumer's already kind of migrating.
Do you do much in food service, where you can go a little bit more direct? They could pay a little bit higher.
We would love to, especially because when you think about our investment in packaging and then in marketing and in demos, like demos are, just for anybody that would watch this, demos are when you give out free samples. So you could just call it sampling, but that is expensive. It is very expensive to run a sampling program. And we know, because we do it and we've done it for years and years. But when you strip out all that and you're just saying like, hey, we can put our unbranded product in a box and sell it to schools, institutions, restaurants, whoever, then it is an interesting opportunity. We sell to some public schools, typically like urban public schools. And we put emphasis on that because it was core to the mission at the beginning, around knowing that a premium, or knowing that an organic stone milled product was going to have to start in premium grocers at a high price point. We wanted to make sure that there was some way that we could feel good about making a change beyond just kind of that top, kind of the top of the economic kind of profile. And so we started our company. Our first customer was Boston Public Schools.
Oh,
And
cool.
so we produced stone milled bagels and tortillas. And then we brought on the city that our mill and bakeries in, and we started feeding them, and then we've expanded. Last year, the number is 75,000 kids total.
That's amazing. I didn't know it was that.
Yeah,
Well, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah. And we designed, for better or worse, because it was a painful project, but
Hmm.
we designed a stone milled pizza crust
Hmm.
because we had been selling bagels for years to some of these school systems, and one of like the real visionary and pioneer, the school system that really wants to make changes in Western Massachusetts. It's a city called Springfield, and their leadership is always want to push and do better. And so they said, hey, like bagels are great, but not super culturally relevant for our schools. We have um, so many Spanish kids, but pizza is the thing.
Yeah.
You want to make a change at the products that kids eat the most of, which is like a no-brainer. And so they got a grant to help us with the R&D. And so we were able to develop this pizza crust, which is awesome. It's so good. It tastes so good. It's so much better than the alternative that we replaced. And there's a lot of impact and potential with it.
Hmm.
But you learn the hard way. Really, as a business, you really need to commercialize a product for retail first and then take it to food service. It's not the best way to do it inverted. So to go to a school and then try to bring it back to retail.
Yeah, I would think it would be inverted because food service. Yeah, because you're going to be more. You could go more direct, but interesting. Why is that?
I think there's just a lot of, it's hard to sell products into retailers. It's
Hmm.
harder to sell it into schools. There's just a lot of layers and just I don't know the right word. I don't want to say apathy, but it's hard. It's hard to make change there. And so, our products cost more for sure.
That was kind of like the closing ass part here, which was like talking. Obviously, transparent is expensive and high quality is expensive. So how do you think about like how do you compare to your alternatives today, and how do we think about getting that price down?
I mean, the good news is our bread is on par with the peer group. So if you're going to buy an organic loaf of bread,
Hmm.
we are right on par, which is kind of crazy to think about based on what we built and the process behind what we do.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we think that the consumer already has been trained to think that bread should be cheap. So we do think there's a kind of a ceiling to where we can go. I mean, if you walked into a provincial grocery store, you could literally buy a big loaf of white bread
Yeah. I feel
or
like,
wheat bread for like $1.99.
yeah,
And so, we're at $6.99. The
yeah.
cool thing is that at a place like Costco, we can be really not aggressive, but it's a function of the way that retailer marks up all of their products. And so there's really if you were going to switch from another organic bread and choose One Mighty Mill at a place like Costco, you wouldn't even feel a difference.
Price wise.
You feel a difference physically. You feel great, but you wouldn't. Yeah, price wise, it's like the exact same. At the school level, we ask the school what they need because
Sure.
we just can't walk in with like price.
Yeah, sure.
So it's like, hey, okay, what do you need us to be at? And then let us work backwards and see if it's even viable. Like we already know that the margin's going to be so compressed, but the reason why we do the school stuff is different, is tricky. But I will say there's some hidden costs for the schools because like they can buy pizza frozen with all this crap inside of it. But guess what? It comes with tomato sauce and cheese on top of it, and they
Hmm.
can just put it in the oven. And for us, you got to buy the shell, you buy the crust
The whole
from
thing.
us, and then you have to, the lunch team has to put the sauce and cheese on. And, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. It
Yeah.
is for, when you're trying to feed thousands of kids. So there has to be a real commitment by leadership to say, like, we absolutely, we want this, and this is an opportunity to do better. The cool thing is in New York State, there's this thing called New York Grown. So it's an initiative that gives incentives back to school systems that source food grown in New York State.
Oh, that's
And
great.
so, yeah, and so when we developed our pizza crust, the unknowing, because of what we're trying to do, the formula had over 50% of the wheat in the flour was grown from our organic partner in New York.
Mhm.
And so the product itself was already New York grown, even though we didn't even know about the incentive. And so somebody else in New York discovered it. And so we've made some inroads with New York, actually. So there's Syracuse Public Schools, very random. And then there's a few other public schools that are now on board, and there's a lot of interest, which is pretty cool.
You know, it's great. I mean, it's like, this is my hope, man. My hope is, I mean, this is where, when you say, if you like think about the important things to put dollars and incentives and things towards to like help enable happen and to actually feed our kid nutritious foods. I'm just glad to hear to say that. My hope, I know it's been a lot of lip service thus far, but my hope is this is just the very beginning with the new administration towards it. And I mean, you've picked such an important, I mean, I'm just so connected with, I mean, I could literally sit here and talk to you for literally hours and hours and hours about this because I think it's just so important. But and I want to say that whenever you want to come back, I will talk to you whenever you want about anything that you guys are doing, because whatever we can do is, we're just getting started. Whatever we can do to support and just get the word out. I think what you're saying is like over and over and over again. It's critical.
It's
So
awesome, man. That's what we need.
yeah, for sure. So last question: so if you were not working on One Mighty Mill right now and you decided to take this journey, what would you be doing?
Oh God, I don't know, man. This is like consuming, like, personal. This is like my identity right now. So it's hard to think about anything else. I would say, I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
then you're doing the right thing.
It's tunnel vision. I got to get this. We have to get this company to be sustainable. Like, we need to get it to that break even moment where we kind of define and control our own destiny. And really, that's all I want to do. I don't want to do anything else until we solve that. And then, yeah, I do think if I didn't do this, I think I would have to be doing something in food, because I have this, like, I think from being in the restaurant business for so long, I still get like angry when I stand in a grocery store for too long and I see people's shopping carts, and I just feel like people, they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, and we're part of this like system that is keeping people from challenging anything. And we're just these passive consumers that are just at the mercy of like people who don't care about us. Where it's not people, but it's like these forces that are so big.
Incentive structures.
Yeah. And so I think just that feeling that I get means that I would probably find something else. I don't know what it would be.
Cool. Well, listen, tell everyone where can they reach out to you, or to One Mighty Mill, where can they find more information or buy your products?
Yeah, I mean, go buy us. Best thing to do, don't just go online. Go into a store. Go buy our bread and bagels. So we're sold in Costco we're sold in Whole Foods across the country, except for a couple of random pockets. But you should be able to find us on both coasts and in the Midwest. And on the California at Costco, we're going to be, we're in Target in the Midwest, and we're in some New England. We have a lot of distribution in New England. So if you go grocery shopping in New England, you should be able to find us in places like Market Basket. But otherwise, you can go to our website, onemightymill.com, and check us out on Instagram. And yeah, we love the support. Everybody, every person can help us get us over the hump.
Yeah, I love the thing. It's like consuming flour that works for your body, not against it. So we can leave it at that. This is as simple as it can be.
That's it. Maybe that's what we put on pack. Maybe you just figured it out. We're doing this crazy consumer insight study to try to solve it, but maybe that's it.
Flour that doesn't suck. Flour that doesn't leave you bloated.
Yeah, literally.
I'm going to stop it here.
Cool, buddy.
Cool. Thanks, John.
Thanks.